Okay. Sorry. Small kind fine-tuning needs to happen because we are low-key streaming on a different setup. I basically found a standing desk outside, and it is phenomenal. It has changed my life. I love it so much. But this is the first time I'm streaming on it, so we're just gonna figure out this setup and how it needs to work to be beautiful and such. I'm not wearing pajama pants. You're wearing pajama pants. Ha 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 ha. And then we just want to plug in the headphones. I don't know what this man is doing. He's stealing a grip tape. That's what he's doing.
I am a quiet soul.
You could have seen his face. Great. But we just want to plug in the headphones. Oh, wait. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? This is why we like to go in on the YouTube app, pull up the stream, and make sure you guys can hear me. Yeah. How are you guys doing? How are you doing today? Life is. How are you guys doing? You can hear me. It's working. Well, yeah. How are you guys doing? Life has been swell. Life has been a treat, dare I say. We're slowly but surely living life and progressing in life. I'm wearing this shirt that was from my favorite bookstore back in New Mexico. It closed down years before I even left New Mexico. But I'm emotional. I'm devoted to this brand. If they came back, if Hastings ever came back or opened in Hawaii, I would be more than happy to be all about the brand. I would be all in on that. You don't even know. That was such a good bookstore. Yeah, they sold video games and movies and stuff too, but the book section, beautiful. Also, just in case you follow me on GoodReads, I totally didn't wait until the last minute to start reading this graphic novel. That's not scholarly of me, procrastinating until the last minute. But I would like to say, if hypothetically I had done such blasphemous things, I totally could have finished reading that entire graphic novel in a couple hours. Just hypothetically, if that had been what I had decided to do, which it was not. Throwing it out there. But Kill Shakespeare, I read the first one a while ago. I will work to make sure that there's an easy way, because I plan on doing, when I do a series, I want to try and get through as much of the series as you guys are interested in hearing about. So I will try and make that easier to find, but it is in there. That collection, I can make a playlist for the Kill Shakespeare live streams as well as I do want to continue reading Critical Failures, those books, so I'll a playlist for those as well. But yeah, so Kill Shakespeare, basically, in case you weren't here, we have Hamlet. We have all of the characters. We're in a world where all the characters Shakespeare has written are real. So you have Hamlet, who is the Shadow King. He is destined, because for the most part, Shakespeare to these people is a god, is unreal, is they don't even really know if he exists, if he is a physical being that they can communicate with. So Hamlet, it's after he is in his story, after he has killed Polonius and is off to sea because he's been banished, he gets transported to this other land, and now it is his job. He is the one that is destined to be able to actually get to Shakespeare and where Shakespeare lives, and he is to either kill Shakespeare or is to bring Shakespeare to the people and make life great for them. Don't forget to drink. Don't forget to drink a drink. Who was that? Who's meowing?
What?
Someone meowed. But Hamlet's the one destined to either kill Shakespeare or bring him back to help the people. You've got Richard, who initially meets with Hamlet, pulls him out of the water after like their shipwrecks in this new land, and he is like, "Here's this knife. You have to kill Shakespeare. He is a monster." We find out Richard's actually the bad guy. He's teamed up with Macbeth's wife, who is an even badder guy. Hamlet has this knife on him. That's important to the story. Hamlet has this knife on him. He goes, he meets up with Juliet, Othello, and a bunch of other people, and Falstaff, and a bunch of other people who follow Will Shakespeare religiously and think of him as a god. And so you kind of have him in this in-between of finding out that Richard is a bad guy, and now he has to try and live up to the expectations these people have for the Shadow King. So he goes off. When we get to the start of the story, they have this interesting scene that I actually really do like. So Hamlet is in, there's like a group of players come by, and they're making on a play, and they're specifically interested in getting Hamlet up on stage. He gets up on stage, and they start telling a play that is essentially the story of how his father died, and it freaks him out, it throws him off. He runs on stage and ends up running into this mirror house that they have. And in that, like, when he looks into a mirror, he sees a monster, and he's freaking out, and then Juliet goes in there to console him, and they just start talking about their backstories, and they talk about how Hamlet is, like, caught up in the fact that he wants to defend his father's death, but his father wasn't perfect. His father wasn't that great, necessarily the greatest guy. His father didn't even necessarily love him, but he loved his father, and he felt like he had to defend him in that way. And then, but now he feels he doesn't know who he is anymore because he doesn't feel like he knows who he is anymore, because you see, he didn't end up defending his father's death. He didn't avenge his father's death, and he's run off somewhere. He feels like a coward because he's run off to this other land, and he's given up on the chase to try and bring his father back to life, something that Richard promised him. Also, for Spirit Force, this isn't actually written by Shakespeare, by the way. For Spirit Force and anyone else that I didn't make this clear for, this graphic novel series isn't written by Shakespeare. It's written by, I should probably look up the name of these people, but they made it, and they just use his characters, the dialect that they use in the story, stuff like that. So Hamlet feels like a coward, and he just doesn't know who he is anymore. And then you go over to Juliet's side of it, and again, she's looking in the mirror, she sees herself as a monster now, and she's talking about the fact that when she was younger, she felt like she was an idiot because she was in love with this guy named Romeo, and they decided that because their parents hated each other, they had to go along with this crazy plan, and if it didn't work, they had to kill themselves, because if they couldn't be together, life wasn't worth it. But she ended up getting rescued by a doctor, but he ended up passing. She believes he passed. And so she had to go on grieving and blaming herself for his death, and blaming like her ignorance as a young woman for the death of this person that she loves. And this moment of them, like the imagery, God, if it weren't for copyright, I would show you some of the images throughout this book. If it weren't for copyright and the fact that I don't have a Stream Deck, I would show you some of the images from this graphic novel, because they're so intense, and it shows like there's shards of glass everywhere that's reflecting different images of these people, and it looks so well. It looks so good. So they have this bonding experience, and then the two fall in love. And I'm not gonna lie, like, I understand how intense, like, how being able to bond with someone like that can bring people together, but that felt very fast for me. Like, immediately afterwards, they start calling each other my love of my life. They're like making out and whatnot, and that felt very fast to me. And that kind of pace does continue throughout the rest of the graphic novel. So after they do that, they like make out. Hamlet goes, just him and Falstaff. It's supposed to be just those two. They're off to try and figure out like where Will Shakespeare is. It is Hamlet's job to find Will, and there's a battle coming. He needs Will to be there for them. So he goes off. He's able to like create this portal to Will Shakespeare, But they run into these religious knights who are led by Romeo. Ching. So Romeo was like, after the whole thing, it's basically the same thing. He was brought back to life by someone, and he was under the impression that Juliet died. He trained basically as a monk, and he's basically a crusader. He trained as a monk and like learned the love of Shakespeare and to kill all those that like falsely proclaim to be Shakespeare or the Shadow King. So you have Hamlet, who's a Shadow King. Romeo threatens to kill him, doesn't, because like literally a magic portal just kind of it's not a magic portal, but like the trees bend and create a magical forest, and Hamlet goes in to find Shakespeare. He gets to him and realizes that Shakespeare is a drunk. Shakespeare's drunk, he's depressed, and he's like, your people need you. They need you so bad. Either come with me or give me the quill so I can help them. Shakespeare's like, no, you just want power. And what we realize is they're arguing about this whole thing. Basically, you just want power. No, I'm trying to help these people. Why won't you help these people? And the knife that Richard had given them comes to life and tries to kill them both. Hamlet traps it and is like, either come with me or like give me the quill. Well, Shakespeare decides to do neither. So they go off back to the camp, take Romeo and all of his men with them, and obviously, because Juliet and Hamlet had the whole discussion about Romeo and what he meant to her, he is under the impression now that like once she realizes Romeo is alive, she's going to break up with him. But he's willing to allow that to happen. So he's like, Romeo, that girl over there, I need you to protect her. Never let her out of your sight. They go, they hug, and Hamlet essentially just kind of dips out. He's like, if I can't be with the woman I love, then none of this is worth it anymore. And he decides he doesn't want to help them until Falstaff, who in the first graphic novel, again, if you hadn't seen the other stream, he was the one that saved him, that like took Hamlet from Richard's people. They had like some fun times in a bar, and he introduced him to Juliet and Othello. So Falstaff goes into the battle to try and help some people, and he ends up dying. Hamlet's like, no, this is enough. He goes back, gets Will, encourages Will to come back and help everyone. He does that. So now he has this magical quill, essentially makes him a god, I guess. That essentially does make him a god. He's ridiculously incredible powers. So he's there. He ends up fighting one-on-one with Richard. But he doesn't want to kill Richard at first. And so he's just fighting him. Yeah, that's right. So he's just fighting him. And then it gets to the point where Richard overpowers him, takes the quill, and then Macbeth's wife, who I admit, when we did Macbeth for my school, in reading for school, because we had to read aloud and the teacher refused to let me have my own book to just read to myself, I couldn't really get a hold of all the details of Macbeth, but I'm pretty damn sure she wasn't like Jean Grey. And that's who is in this. I don't know, that's something I missed maybe in the first graphic novel of Kill Shakespeare, but she is basically just Jean Grey in this. And so she's throwing like plasma balls at Richard, and he drops the quill. Hamlet gets it, gives it to Will. Will kills Richard, and it hurts his heart, but he kills Richard. And the queen uses her Jean Grey powers, makes a portal for herself, vanishes before Will can do anything else to her. He doesn't want to kill any of these people. He doesn't want to kill any of his children, but in order to protect them, Richard had to die, is what he ended up the conclusion he ended up coming to. So again, the queen is just off somewhere now. Will is then really the end of it is Will, he wants to look at all of the faces of all the people that died, and Hamlet's like, shut up, dude. You don't want to remember them. You don't want to remember these people. You want to remember your guilt, and you need to move past that. You need to be able to grow and strengthen from that. So Will decides he wants to go off, live his life, and be amongst his people, learn from them. Next, so that's what Will ends up doing. He gives Hamlet a letter to read to the people. Romeo gets upset because not only has Will left, he's also, after talking to Juliet no longer loves him. So he's like, basically by force, it sounds like he's by force going to be a virgin, is basically what's going to happen here. Oh, I mean, I guess they had sex in the play. So by force, he's going to die alone, is basically what seems like is going to happen here. So Romeo's upset. Juliet and Hamlet are a couple. Falstaff's still dead, but they're joyful in his memory. They also killed that one guy who was also a part of Othello's story. I forgot his name. He wasn't useful. He wasn't that useful in the story. He caused a couple issues, but he didn't really need to have a name, And there are a couple things that I did want to talk about specifically when we're talking about the story. I want to talk about, because again, as I'm discussing it, it feels like a lot happened, but it went by so fast. This is a graphic novel of 160 pages. It went by so fast. Not a lot of it was thoroughly developed, so that tells me that there's if I had come across this stuff and not known that there were 4 other books in the novel series, I would have known that there was more in this series, because it does not feel completed at all. It feels like it was rushed. It feels like it was set up. This is all set up. A big plot happened, but this was all built up. This was all exposition and the ground stages for more books. And honestly, it does almost remind me of the Chronicles of Narnia, where you have, the kids go through this whole setup. They go through this whole experience in the first book, but that's not necessarily the whole story that they all go through. They go through, I think it's 7 books in the Chronicles of Narnia. Also, side note, if you've read the Chronicles of Narnia, but you have not read The Magician's Nephew, you have not read the Chronicles of Narnia. The Magician's Nephew is so good. But it feels like there's a lot more to be developed in the story. It feels like everything was almost rushed, because this is not where the real strength of the plot is coming from. Like I said earlier, the romance between Hamlet and Juliet felt like it happened instantly, and I'm assuming that's because this is going to be a whole overarching story. And that's actually another thing I wanted to talk to you about, is how you can read a mystery, or how you can read a book and basically pick out some points to kind of tell you where the plot is going. A better way of explaining this is, if I'm reading a mystery, I pride myself on my ability to be able to figure out who the killer is before the actual main character does. And that's because if it's well written, you should be able to see it. Number one thing in any book is, if the character has a name, they have a purpose. So you have, Romeo specifically. Romeo could have stayed dead, and that would not have changed a thing in this entire book. If he had just stayed dead and they just thrown an actual just random crusade group and none of them had a name, it would have been exactly the same. It literally didn't even cause an impact on the story with Juliet. She literally had no emotional change whatsoever to it. So my thinking is the fact that we have this character, he has a name, he has a backstory, but he's not been used in the series. That tells me that there's a good chance Romeo is actually going to become some form of villain throughout the rest of this series, because he lost the love of his life. When Hamlet was giving this speech and reading the words that Will had given him to read to the people, he was screaming, "That's blasphemy! Will would never say that. You're a heretic." And then he left, and then he was they had an emotional talk, but you can already see how he's kind of fighting Hamlet's authority, whereas most people would still not necessarily. He's a little bit of a step above the average person. He is closer, the fairies from Hamlet's plays. The fairies, they are considered almost like demigods. And so Hamlet is more in between the level of demigod and like mortal for them because of the legendary status that he holds as the Shadow King. But you can already see where Romeo is starting to just defect from that and starting to like be angry and resent Hamlet and all of the things that he's done, both with like reporting Will to have left the people as well as taking away Juliet. And so you can see how he could potentially be almost this like secondary villain. And there's still, again, like the queen is out there. She wants to kill Shakespeare. I don't think, from what she said, she doesn't want the quill for its power, but she does want to be known as the person that was able to actually kill William Shakespeare. So that's kind of the thought process, one of the basic thought processes I go through when I'm reading like a mystery or something like that, where I'll like read through, and once you have the mystery, you figure out like every character, if they are given a name, figure out how important they've been to the story so far. If they have a name and they have like no purpose whatsoever to the story, then there's a good chance that they were the person that did it. Like, I actually just watched. I've kind of gotten sidetracked, but I just watched an episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where like one of the first episode of this like most recent season, and they were trying to figure out who like was attempted this assassination, and then like Captain brings over this random hot dog guy who said he saw someone leaving with the bag, and I'm like, oh, hot dog guy did it. Hot dog guy did it. 10 minutes later, oh, you got the wrong man. It was the hot dog guy. I knew all along. So yeah, that's probably why I'm not a fun person to read with. But like that's the kind of thing where you can see between where the story, where the plot of this particular book is going to end, where the plot of the whole thing is going to end. I don't personally think it like kills fun. I think it adds a bit of problem solving to every book that I read. So positivity, man. But that is, again, like, if I can't like say this enough. The imagery in that mirror scene at the beginning of the volume is so pretty. It like you can really see, and that's the other thing that's hard when reading a graphic novel. I can go over the plot with you guys, but it's hard to like describe to you the images and the like imagery that I get to see when I'm reading through these, and it's so well done. I actually really do like reading the graphic novels for the channel because they aren't necessarily like, it's a different experience. It's a different experience than reading an ebook or reading an audiobook or reading in print, which I'm not going to lie, it might be a second before I read in print because I just don't have time right now, especially with the publishing of books and writing of books and videos. I'm tired. And like a part-time job that's basically full-time hours in 3 days. I'm tired. But I will for sure eventually get to reading print books again. If you guys have checked out, I am trying to update as well on GoodReads. Like, while I'm ranting for this like last couple minutes, feel free, if you have any questions, throw them in the comment section. I'll definitely try and get to them. I'm kind of just rambling now. But I have the GoodReads in which I'm trying to update for you guys as I read the different things that I'm like feeling and experiencing as I'm reading them. I did it a lot for Critical Failures. Again, if you were to go at the GoodReads and look at it now, it might look as if I had just started reading Kill Shakespeare yesterday morning and just tried to push through all of it at once before it, without like leaving comments, because I didn't know how much time I'd actually need to read it. But that's just a coincidence, guys. It's fine. I'm not gonna lie, I thought it would take, I was in the middle of like thinking it would take a lot longer to discuss either the plot or like some of the other notes that I had, because I didn't write a ton of them. Was there anything else? Yeah, there wasn't a ton of things to super overanalyze and super think about, because it does feel more like this book, these past two books are just laying exposition down, because there's a good chance Shakespeare does die. Like, what I'm also kind of hypothesizing is that Shakespeare might actually die at some point and Hamlet has to take over his powers, which is because, again, like, the main image of the series is Shakespeare, like, bloody, the quill is, like, fallen out of his hand, and that's the main image of the series. So that tells me that there's a good chance Shakespeare dies, and I would assume that Hamlet would then take over his powers. There's also the question lying around about, because the rest of Hamlet's story does happen, and so there's the question of how that comes about, because it could be, if Will doesn't die, then maybe he wrote that for the rest of Hamlet's story. Why he would do that? Like, maybe they have a falling out, or maybe this is just what he feels is right after all that Hamlet's been through. Maybe Hamlet, after Will dies, does go crazy with the power of the quill, and that's why he goes back to try and avenge his father's murder again. And because in Hamlet, he's actually decently crazy when he goes back to kill Claudius. I think Claudius is his brother's name. And so he's actually decently crazy. So maybe the power of the quill is going to be what, like, drives him to do the things that he does. Like, I think they decide, it's so convoluted, the end of Hamlet. They decide they want to have a fencing tournament to see who should be the rightful king, I think. And Hamlet has poisoned the tip of his sword, but his mother also gives him, like, a poison drink. Like, at the end of Hamlet, everyone dies. And so I'm trying to think of how that becomes implemented in this series, and how we end up getting to that, which I would assume would be the end point, the end game of the series, is seeing how Hamlet gets transitioned into his real story, especially now that he's found love in Juliet. Like, that's also going to be a factor. Is him just, like, why would he leave this woman that he loves? Does she end up dying as well? There's just a lot of questions. There's probably going to be a lot of death. The deaths in this thing are gory. Like, it's rough. Like, someone gets decapitated. Like, people get their eyes gouged out. Like, graphic novels are not, they're not for your 5-year-old, for sure. But yeah, that's really all I had to say about this book. I definitely am suggesting this. It's really good. It's really well done. I'm still, for sure, like, as I'm reading it, there's no part of me that thinks there's a chance I would not continue the series, because, again, like, I need to know what happens. I need to know where this is going. I want to see Romeo turn into a bad guy. That would be such an interesting storyline to see. And it's all on video, so if that's what ends up happening, then I'm just awesome at what I do, so whatever. But we're going to be doing that. But what I'm trying to do in the future, I will try and avoid doing multiple series at once, so that way we can get through them faster. I can do, like, one book from the series a month, which is just like every other video. I'm sorry. But for right now, it's going to be probably another while before I get back around to Kill Shakespeare, because I'm going to be reading the next book that I'm reading, and then I'm going to read the next book in Critical Failures, and we'll see how people are liking that series. But the next book that I do want to read is something that's definitely, it caught my eye the second it landed on Audible, and I am actually super excited to be reading it. I'm going to be reading Stan Lee Alliance's A Trick of Light. And from what I understand, I can come back with more information on it when I actually do that stream. But to my understanding, this is one of the last projects Stan Lee was working on before he passed. So I'm really interested in reading it. I cannot promise you that I won't cry while doing so, or while giving the live stream. I'm an emotional human. It happens. you've poked around my channel enough to know that I cry. So we'll see what happens with that. But until next time, valedictions, friends. Industry.